This story was narrated by VidCrew Media. Please show your support by like and subscribe. Thank you. I hit her. Without the slightest hesitation, Jared took 2 steps forward. I hit her. The man sized him up before glancing at Zane and the others behind him. He then barked, "Kid, I might spare you if you fall to your knees and apologize to my wife right now. Otherwise, none of you are going to escape today." The moment Zane heard that and realized that the man had assumed they were with Jared, he was petrified and hurriedly waved his hand in denial, explaining, Sir, you misunderstood. We're not with him. Although we're acquainted, we have no idea what he did." Hearing that, the man shifted his gaze to his wife. The woman nodded and affirmed, "It was just that kid. Not only did he ram into my car, but he even slapped me. Kid, we'll settle the issue of the car separately. Since you slapped my wife, you might still escape with your life if you were to kneel right away." The man stared at Jared with murderous intent. In response, Jared chuckled softly. "The lot of you love having others kneeling at your feet. Huh, but let me tell you something. I don't kneel to anyone other than my parents. Besides, you all aren't worthy of it either." "What did you just say, kid?" The man thundered in a towering rage after being stunned for a moment. He couldn't quite believe that Jared actually dared to say such a thing, despite facing so many people alone. "Are you insane, Jared? You're courting death," Maria reproached in a shout. Conversely, Zane scoffed with a smirk. "Just drop the act now that things have come to this, Jared. Even if you were to get on your knees, we wouldn't laugh at you, much less tell anyone in the office." "Exactly. We'll never do such a thing. So just do it. Otherwise, you'll still end up on your knees after having been beaten up later," Lydia echoed sneeringly. "Since you both like kneeling so much, you two do it instead," Jared said to Zane and Lydia. "HMPH. Go on acting all high and mighty. We'll just see who has to drop to his knees and beg for mercy later." Zane snorted. When the man saw that Jared was obstinate and refused to kneel, his expression went chilly. "You've got quite the backbone, kid. However, you're unlucky to bump into me today. No matter how dogged you are, I'll have you singing a different tune later." After saying that, he ordered with a wave of his hand, "Cripple him." In a flash, the dozen men charged toward Jared. Terrified at that sight, Zane and the others hastily backed away. While Maria was anxious, she couldn't do anything right then. "Stop." A roar sounded before the property manager in a suit frantically rushed over with several security guards. "What's the meaning of this, Mr. Ziegler? Are you stopping me from making a move?" the man demanded with disgruntlement written all over his face when he saw the property manager Mark. "Ziegler, why don't you do me a favor and forget about the incident today, Mr. Daniels? I'll take care of all your losses," Mark urged with a fawning smile. It seemed that they were acquainted, but that wasn't surprising, since one was a property owner, and the other was the property manager. "Have you gotten your wires crossed today? Or is this kid your relative, Mr. Ziegler? Why are you imploring me on his behalf?" the man, Toby Daniels, demanded with a mystified look. Mark glanced at Jared before leaning close to the man's ear and whispering, "You might not know this, Mr. Daniels, but Mr. Chance lives at the mansion at the top of the hill, and he has been living there for some time." Toby was taken aback to hear that. "Doesn't that mansion belong to the Sullivan family?" Mark nodded in affirmation. "Yes. Therefore, he's definitely associated with the Sullivan family, since he's living there." Toby sized Jared up again before sneering with disbelief in his eyes. "I don't believe that he's acquainted with the Sullivan family. A pauper like him can't possibly have anything to do with the Sullivan family. How could that be when he's driving a shabby Ford?" "Stop trying to fool me, Mr. Ziegler. I'm sorry, but I won't be able to do you a favor today." He didn't believe that in the least. Considering his cheap dressing and rickety Ford, how could he possibly be acquainted with the Sullivan family? "Are you threatening me?" "Toby, I'm really not lying to you, Mr. Chance." Before Mark could finish speaking, the man pushed him away. "If he doesn't kneel today, no one can save him. I'll not spare him at all." With that, he glanced at his subordinate and signaled for them to attack. Noticing that, Mark quickly shot a look at the sales associate. telling her to bring Zane and the rest away. It was better to have fewer witnesses. If word got out or if someone took a video, Dragon Bay's reputation would be ruined. When the sales associate saw that, she quickly called Zane over and left. However, he was reluctant because he wanted to see Jared being beaten up. "It's a pity that they won't let me watch such an entertaining scene," lamented Zane disappointedly. "Yeah, Jared has been acting all arrogant recently. Now he's met a tough opponent. How unlucky of him," mocked Lydia. Only Maria frowned worriedly. "If he gets killed, it'll be troublesome." "Maria, you aren't worried about Jared, right? Don't you hate him?" asked Lydia when she noticed Maria's reaction. "I do hate him, but I can't just watch him die." There was a troubled expression on Maria's face. "Why don't we call the police?" "Call the police? Didn't you see how fierce that man was? If he finds out that we called the police, he might kill our families," Zane threatened Maria. As expected, Maria was so scared that she did not dare to mention calling the police anymore. Meanwhile, at the entrance of Dragon Bay, Jared had already defeated all of Toby's subordinates. Since they were just a bunch of gangsters, he only spent a little more than 10 seconds. When Toby saw how skilled Jared was, a fearful expression crossed his face. The woman became even more anxious. "Do you still want me to kneel and apologize to you?" Jared stared at Toby and asked with a cold smirk. The corners of Toby's eyes twitched. In the end, he gritted his teeth and taunted, "You fight very well. Huh, let me tell you this. I've already noted down your car plate. I can find out your name and address. Even if you can fight, I don't believe that your family can fight too." Toby threatened Jared by using the latter's family as leverage. What he did not know was that he had already touched Jared's raw nerve. "Are you threatening me?" A murderous glint appeared in Jared's eyes, while his hostile aura enveloped Toby. Shuddering uncontrollably, Toby felt a chill run down his spine. "Don't look at me like that, brat. Do you dare to kill me right in front of everyone?" Gritting his teeth, Toby spat viciously. "If you don't kill me today, I'll find a chance to kill your family." Toby put up a stubborn front in front of Jared, not caring how shamelessly he was acting. "You're looking for your own doom." The murderous aura around Jared intensified. When Mark noticed that, he quickly stood in front of Jared. "Forget it, Mr. Chance. There's no need to fight. This is just a trivial matter." Mark did not want anyone to die in his district. Furthermore, he could not afford to offend any of them. Nor did he want anything bad to happen. Staying silent, Jared whipped out his phone and called Tommy. "Come to the entrance of Dragon Bay in 10 minutes. With that, Jared hung up. Seeing how Jared called for backup, Toby smirked. "I didn't expect that you could call for backup. I'm waiting to see what kind of help you've gotten. Get rid of him." Toby made a call as he said that, evidently calling for backup too. Soon, a few vans rushed over, and out came more people, all armed with clubs. When Toby saw that his men had come, he asked gloatingly, "Where are your men? Are they too scared to come?" "They're here," replied Jared calmly. A car was speeding toward them from a distance away at a rapid speed. When Toby saw that small car, he guffawed. "Are you kidding me? Did you only summon a car over? How many people can it carry? Even if you can fight, I can keep calling for backup. You'd die from exhaustion." "I hope that you can continue smiling after you see the person," replied Jared with a cold smirk. Soon, the car reached them. A burly man opened the door and got out of the car. When Toby got a clearer glimpse of the person, his smile froze on his face. Everyone else gasped sharply. The person was none other than Tommy. There was no one else with him. After walking toward Jared briskly, he greeted respectfully, "Mr. Chance." When Toby saw how respectful Tommy was to Jared, he was dumbfounded. His body started to tremble uncontrollably. "Get rid of him," instructed Jared as he glanced at Toby. Tommy nodded before spinning around and facing Toby, who was shuddering in fear. Tommy swept his gaze across the other men. With their faces turning pale from fear, Toby's subordinates quickly tossed their weapons away. "Get lost. Do you want to stay here and die?" bellowed Tommy. Toby's men were so scared that they scurried away. It would be ridiculous if measly gangsters like them dared to offend the king of Horrington's underground. Mr. Lewis greeted Toby as he shivered. Tommy stepped forward and landed a harsh slap on his face. Toby did not even dare to move. However, his wife could not hold herself back and immediately shrieked at Tommy. "Who are you? What rights do you have to hit him?" When she shouted at Tommy, Toby was so shocked that he almost fainted. Slap. Toby slapped his wife. "UBTCH. Who told you to speak? Are you in any position to say something?" Secretly, he cursed at his wife. If she had not offended Jared and called him over, Tommy would not have been alerted about this. Furthermore, looking at how respectful he was to Jared, it was obvious that Jared had a special status. However, he could not figure out why someone as important as him was driving a rundown Ford. After Toby slapped her, her face swelled up terribly. However, he knew that if he was not harsh enough, both of them might die. "Mr. Lewis, she doesn't think before speaking. Please don't be angry." Toby apologized to Tommy profusely. However, Tommy did not acknowledge it at all. He grabbed Toby's collar and punched him in the stomach so forcefully that he collapsed onto the ground in pain. Jared walked toward Toby slowly and looked down on him. "Didn't you tell me to kneel and apologize? Why are you kneeling now?" asked Jared teasingly. Not daring to raise his head, Toby groveled and said, "Please spare my life. I'm not even human. I was blind to who you are." Toby kept pleading for mercy. "I didn't want to kill you, but you threatened my family." Ignoring Toby, Jared got into the car, smashed the Maserati to the side, and drove into the district, afraid of being beaten up. After hearing what Jared said, Tommy knew what to do. No matter how much Toby pleaded, Tommy still dragged him to the car. Only death awaited him. The woman watched while her husband got taken away. Staring at the Maserati, which had been utterly destroyed, she became dumbfounded. It took a while before Mark and the other security guards returned to their senses. Mark said to the security guards, "If you see Mr. Chance in the future, you better be respectful. Anyone who dares to disrespect him will be fired immediately." Meanwhile, Jared drove up the hill. A short while later, he bumped into Zane and the rest, who had already reviewed the houses and were preparing to leave with the sales associate. When they saw Jared driving his damaged Ford, they were stunned. They could not figure out how he managed to enter. Jared must have barged in with his car when no one was looking. "He's probably afraid of getting beaten up," said Lydia as she stared at the car's damaged hood. "He's so bold. How dare he barge into Dragon Bay?" mocked Zane. When the sales associate heard their conversation, an idea popped into her head. She dashed over and stopped Jared. "If this guy really barged in, the company would definitely reward me for stopping him." The sales associate's thoughts were very naive. As she did not work in the maintenance department, she had no idea that Jared lived in Dragon Bay. "How dare you barge in with your car?" interrogated the sales associate loudly after stopping Jared. Jared was stunned. "I didn't barge in. I drove in. Even your manager saw me." "Stop defending yourself, Jared. Look at how damaged your car is. You must have barged in with your car because you're scared of being beaten up. There's probably someone chasing you, right?" Lydia sauntered over with a mocking look. "Jared, only tenants are allowed to enter the district. Even though we're here to buy a property, we have to be allowed in. Since you aren't here to buy anything, nor are you a property owner, this is considered an encroachment," said Zane with a smirk. "Who told you that I don't own a property here?" asked Jared calmly. When everyone heard what he said, they were stunned. The sales associate asked hurriedly, "Did you buy a house here? Why don't I have an impression of it?" She checked Jared out. He did not seem like someone who could afford a house there. Furthermore, everyone who had bought houses there was all filthy rich. She knew a lot of them and even had their phone numbers. "Stop boasting, Jared. Do you know how much these houses cost? You can't even buy the smallest houses at the foot of the hill with your life savings. How dare you call yourself a property owner?" Zane continued disdainfully. "I've been a manager for so many years. Even with my bonus, I can only afford the down payment for the cheapest house here. How can you, who have just started working, afford a house? You can't even afford a house in the countryside. You only deserve to live in a run-down, dingy district." Contempt was written all over Zane's face. He did not believe that Jared had bought a house there. Even Lydia and Maria did not believe him. If Jared was capable enough to buy a house there was no need for Maria to find a job for him. Sir, since you claim to be a property owner here, please point out which house is yours. Don't even think of lying to me. I know the owners of all the houses here. The sales associate ordered Jared. Yeah. If you can, point out which house is yours. Why don't we have a sit in your house? Asked Lydia in an ambiguous tone. You are unlucky. Jared pointed at the top of the hill. The one at the top of the hill is mine. At the top of the hill. Zane was stunned for a while before bursting into laughter. Are you kidding me, Jared? Do you know how much a mansion on the top of the hill cost? Even if you sell your family, you still can't afford it. Your boast is simply so ridiculous that it's unrealistic. Jared, can you be more realistic? You barging into Dragon Bay today is probably the first and last time you can enter the district. How dare you claim that the mansion at the top of the hill is yours? I bet that you've never even been up there. Even Lydia started laughing out loud. Meanwhile, Maria rolled her eyes at Jared. To her, he was simply an incompetent man who would never amount to anything. Sir, do you know how much the mansion at the top of the hill costs? How dare you boast about it here? The sales associate laughed too. Who are you to say that I'm boasting? Demanded Jared coldly. I was the one who sold the mansion. The owner's last name is Sullivan, not Chance. How can you say that it's yours? The sales associate stared at Jared mockingly, waiting for him to explain. Someone gave it to me, replied Jared with a smile. Gave it to you. The sales associate hid a chuckle behind her hand. Sure. You can even claim that someone gave the entire district of Dragon Bay to you. That's not illegal. However, you've barged into Dragon Bay without permission. According to the rules, I have to chase you out. Immediately after the sales associate finished speaking, a guy wearing a security guard uniform sauntered over with a baton. Faith, why have you come here today? Asked the security with a flattering smile when he saw her. It's you, Kevin. Someone barged into the district. You've come just in time to chase him out. When the sales associate saw the security guard, she immediately pointed at Jared. The security guard sized Jared up before glancing at the battered Ford beside him. He immediately said furiously, DM it. How dare someone barge into the district I'm in charge of? Do you want to die? I'm the head of the security team here. You should have asked around. Kevin, Jared even crashed into a luxurious car at the entrance, and the person threatened to beat him up. He probably barged in with his car because he was scared. If you managed to capture him, you would have gotten yourself a huge achievement. Zane said to Kevin. Yeah, we saw it just now. He crashed into a Maserati. Lydia nodded vigorously too. Although Maria did not speak, she looked quite upset too. I really don't want to care about Jared anymore. I'm really annoyed at how he keeps boasting. You jerk. How dare you crash into a car and barge in afterward? It's really unlucky that you've bumped into me today. As Kevin spoke, he reached out his arm to grab Jared. However, the moment he extended his arm, Jared gripped his wrist and twisted it lightly. Just like that, he restrained Kevin, who yelped in agony. That hurt, you jerk. Let go of me now. Do you know who I am? The manager of the maintenance department is my brother-in-law. If you dare to touch me, I won't let you leave this place, bellowed Kevin. You attacked me without figuring out the situation. How did you become the head of the security team? I said that I own a property here. Is this how you serve your clients? Said Jared. Jay, just let go of me. I'll find out after I ask. Seeing that Jared was skilled in fighting and could defeat him at any moment, Kevin had no choice but to ask Jared to release him. The latter released his grip on Kevin, massaging his wrist. He shot a vicious glare at Jared before whipping out his walkie-talkie. Brother-in-law, all the security guards, gather in Zone A. Someone barged into the district and attacked me, yelled Kevin into his walkie-talkie. He was merely stalling for time by asking Jared to release him. With regards to whether Jared did have a property there, he did not even bother to find out. Anyone could tell that he definitely was not. You jerk. My men will be here shortly. Just wait to be beaten up, threatened Kevin as he glared at Jared viciously. Mark, who had just heaved a sigh of relief, suddenly heard his brother-in-law yell in the walkie-talkie, saying that someone had barged into the district and beaten him up. Mark was immediately gripped with anxiety. He was not worried about Kevin. Instead, he was afraid that his incompetent brother-in-law would cause unnecessary trouble. Initially, he only agreed to let Kevin work as the head of the security, after he begged for the role profusely. He had only joined for 2 days, but was unwilling to do any work. Instead, he fooled around all day and acquainted himself with all the girls in the sales department. When Mark and the other security guards arrived at Zone A, they saw Jared standing beside his car. Cold sweat immediately dripped down his forehead. My fear has come true. My brother-in-law has really caused some huge trouble. Mark quickly hurried over. When Kevin saw that his brother-in-law had arrived with backup, he immediately rushed forward and whined. Mark, this man barged into the district and attacked me. You must teach him a harsh lesson. When Zane saw Mark rushing over with the other security guards, he smirked coldly. Jared, let's see where you can flee now. Although it's not illegal to boast, you still need to pay the price for exaggerating. How dare you claim to be a property owner here, and that you live in the mansion at the top of the hill? Why don't you claim to be God? I've lived for more than 20 years, but it's my first time seeing such a shameless boaster like you. Lydia hid a chuckle behind her hand. The two of them stared at Jared teasingly, waiting for an exciting show to unfold. However, Maria sighed. If Jared ended up getting beaten later, she would try to plead on his behalf and see if it would be useful. After all, she could not just stand idly by and watch him become crippled. However, just when Zane and Lydia were waiting for Mark and the rest to teach Jared a lesson, Mark slapped his brother-in-law. He was so forceful that Kevin almost collapsed onto the floor. Stunned, Kevin stared at Mark with a look of disbelief. Why did you hit me? Are you crazy? Yelled Kevin unhappily. Yeah, I'm crazy. I shouldn't have let you work here as the head of the security team. You're now fired. Get lost and never come back, ordered Mark as he snatched the baton away from Kevin's hands. Kevin glared at Mark furiously. How dare you treat me like this? I'll tell my sister. With that, he stomped away. Zane and the rest were dumbfounded when they saw Mark's actions. Even the sales associate had no idea what was going on. Only the security guards who had tagged along knew that Mark was saving his own brother-in-law. If Kevin stayed there and angered Jared further, he would be killed on the spot. After Kevin left, Mark snuck a look at Jared with sweat dotting his forehead. He was afraid that the latter would refuse to let Kevin leave. However, since Jared remained silent, he heaved a silent sigh of relief. I do not believe you. Mark walked toward Jared briskly and apologized appeasingly. Mr. Chance, I'm really sorry about this. My brother-in-law has just started work, so he knows nothing. Please forgive him. When Zane and the rest saw the manager apologizing to Jared so subserviently, they were dumbfounded. Are you mistaken? He barged into your district, crashed a car, and even beat your brother-in-law up. Why are you acting so subserviently? Do people who work in the maintenance department have such good service? Asked Zane as he stared at Mark incredulously. Yeah. When we wanted to come in to look at which houses to buy, the security guards stopped us. Yet, you're being so courteous to an intruder. You're making me doubt the capabilities of the maintenance department. Isn't he just an ex-convict who had gone to jail? Do you have to stoop so low? Do you actually think that he's a property owner here? Scoffed Lydia. If he can afford a house here, he wouldn't be driving a run-down Ford around. He even claims that the mansion at the top of the hill is his. He's just boasting. Since we work for the same company, I know him well. I'm his direct superior. This guy knows nothing other than to boast, Zane protested to the manager. Mark looked at Zane and Lydia before glancing back at Jared. He did not know what their relationship was, but judging from how the two of them kept mocking Jared, it was clear that they were definitely not friends. Noticing Jared's silence, Mark could not stand it any longer. He said to Zane and Lydia, "It's true that Mr. Chance owns property here, and that the mansion at the top of the hill is his." When Mark spoke, Zane, Lydia, and Maria were flabbergasted. But, Mr. Carlson, the last name of the mansion's owner is Sullivan. I was the one who handled the paperwork. said the sales associate with a doubtful look. Are you mistaken? The mansion at the top of the hill costs at least hundreds of millions. How can a salesman who drives a battered Ford be its owner? I will never believe that. You're a horrible manager. How can you be confused about who owns the properties? Do you think that Jared looks like someone who has a mansion? Zane and Lydia interrogated Mark. Faced with their questions, Mark scoffed coldly. Looks like you know more than me, the manager of the maintenance team. Let me tell you this. It's true that the previous owner's last name is Sullivan. However, the mansion is now Mr. Chance's. If there's nothing else, you can leave now. You're prohibited from entering the district in the future. Zane and the rest were taken aback by his words. No one would believe that Jared owned a mansion that cost hundreds of millions. Can I leave now, Mr. Carlson? Jared did not want to waste any time with Zane and the rest, as he needed to hurry up with his training. Of course. I'm really sorry for taking up your time, Mr. Chance. Mark's attitude immediately became respectful as he opened the car door for Jared. Driving his severely damaged Ford, Jared drove straight toward the top of the hill. When he passed by Zane and the rest, he rolled down the car windows and deliberately scoffed at Zane. I don't believe it. I'll never believe it. It's impossible for him to own a mansion. I'm going to follow him and take a look for myself. He must be boasting, roared Zane like a madman. Meanwhile, Maria watched as Jared's car zoomed away, feeling her cheeks burning. At this stage, she was certain that Jared was not boasting. After all, he could not possibly bribe such an important manager to play along with him. Chased out. When Maria thought about how the mansion cost billions, she could not help but remember how she had looked upon him with disdain because of his poor family. Her father had to force her before she helped him look for a job. Upon recalling all these, she blushed. Meanwhile, Lydia stared at Jared's car until its headlights left her vision. Still, she fixed her gaze on the road toward the top of the hill unblinkingly. The shock was so great that she was paralyzed to the spot. Chase them all out for me. Don't let them enter the district in the future, instructed Mark loudly. The security guards quickly chased Zane and the rest out. As Zane was simply too shocked, he insisted on heading to the top of the hill to see whether Jared was boasting. However, after being struck a few times by the baton, he left obediently. After Jared drove to the mansion and entered, he discovered that it was extremely clean and spotless. Josephine probably sent someone to clean the place. She had always hoped to convince her parents and invite them to stay there. However, Jared didn't want to discuss it yet, as his parents were happily fussing over Jared and Hilda. If she told them now, they might not even believe her. Sitting on the sofa, Jared took out the meat reishi mushroom and placed it on the table. Sensing the rich spiritual energy exuding from it, he was overcome with excitement. It was exceedingly rare to find these meat reishi mushrooms. Ideally, he would reach another breakthrough after absorbing them. Jared had already found the perfect training technique. If he wanted to increase his abilities, the only element lacking was spiritual energy. However, there was a lack of spiritual energy on Earth. It was only at the top of hills where the spiritual energy would be more concentrated. If Jared wanted to increase his abilities quickly, he needed to seek out other solutions. After thinking about it for a while, Jared calmed himself down. He summoned the focus technique slowly and was soon enveloped by a faint mist, as if it could feel something. The meat reishi mushroom in the glass bottle started twisting around frantically, looking like it wanted to escape the bottle. However, no matter how vigorously the meat reishi mushroom turned, its attempts proved futile. Soon, it stopped moving. At a spot that resembled its eyes, pink gas gushed out and floated toward Jared. He opened his mouth slowly and inhaled forcefully. The pink gas suddenly accelerated and was absorbed into his body. Meanwhile, the meat reishi mushroom quickly shrunk. Its initially fair surface, which looked like a youthful girl's skin, started to become wrinkly and dry. Soon, the meat reishi mushroom turned into a pile of powder which ended up being absorbed into Jared's body. Meanwhile, Jared sat on the couch with his eyes slightly closed. Time passed gradually. After a long time, when the sky was about to darken, Jared finally opened his eyes slowly. Delighted, he quickly checked his abdomen. However, other than having more spiritual energy, he did not manage to advance to the next level. Jared sighed heavily. In the end, he got up and left the mansion. Driving the damaged Ford, he left Dragon Bay and parked his car at a repair shop. He planned to hail a taxi home instead. However, just when he was waiting beside the road, a red BMW suddenly stopped in front of him. The car window rolled down, and Maria stuck her head out. "Where are you going, Jared? I'll give you a ride." Jared was taken aback, unused to Maria's sudden change in attitude. "Inappropriate." "I'm going home," said Jared calmly. "Come in. I'm going in the same direction, so I can send you there." While saying that, Maria pushed the car door open. Furthermore, she pushed open the door of the front seat. In the past, she would never have allowed Jared to sit in her car, even if she had to. He could only sit in the back seats. Jared had no idea what Maria was up to again. It was as if she had become someone else. "Come in," urged Maria when she saw him standing there motionlessly. Jared nodded and sat in the front seat. Maria slammed her foot against the accelerator and drove toward Jared's house. Meanwhile, Jared sat silently without saying anything. The atmosphere in the car became slightly awkward. "Jared, do you really own a mansion at the top of Dragon Bay?" After a while, Maria broke the silence. "Yeah," Jared nodded. "Did you buy it yourself?" Maria shot a surprised look at him. "Someone gave it to me," replied Jared calmly. Noticing that Jared did not seem to like talking to her, Maria stopped speaking. After a while, Jared interrupted the silence. "Why aren't you at home to eat at this time? Where are you driving to?" "Zane made a reservation at a restaurant. I'm going to eat with him there and discuss our marriage," said Maria. "You're marrying him?" Jared was taken aback. "Yeah, we've been dating for a long time, and our parents have been hurrying us. Hence, we decided to just get married," explained Maria. Jared was silent for a while before saying, "I'd advise you to think about it carefully. Zane doesn't suit you." Jared said that not because he wanted to take revenge on Zane for always bullying him. In reality, he had already instructed Tommy to investigate Zane secretly. That man was a playboy. When he was still dating Maria, he had slept with multiple women. Although Maria was also quite materialistic, she was still the daughter of his father's comrade. Jared did not want her to dig her own grave. However, Maria was not surprised when she heard what Jared said. Smiling, she explained, "Actually, Zane isn't as bad as you think he is. He might be quite mean to you, but I'll try to coax him out of it in the future." She had misunderstood Jared. She thought that he was saying all those because Zane kept targeting him, which made him develop a hatred for Zane. When Jared heard that, he had no choice but to smile and stop explaining further. Soon, when the car was passing through a dim street, a car suddenly in front suddenly blocked them. Shocked, Maria slammed her feet against the brake and stopped the car. Their cars were inches away from crashing into each other. "How the hell are you driving? Are you blind?" Maria rolled down the car windows, craned her neck, and cursed loudly. However, immediately after she yelled, she quickly withdrew her head fearfully. She had noticed that the car blocking her was a Porsche 911. If they could drive such a car, she would not dare to offend them. Her life would become difficult if she actually provoked them. At that moment, a man and a woman got out of the Porsche. They were none other than Leighton and Sandy, who stared at Jared with a cold smirk. It did not look like they were planning to leave. Looking at their intense stares, Maria could not help but feel fearful. She opened the car door, scrambled out of the car, and apologized. "I didn't do it on purpose. Would you please move your car aside? Why don't you drive away first?" Maria spoke in a subservient tone to Leighton. When the latter glanced at Maria, he saw that she was wearing a pink dress with her hair up in a ponytail. Finding her quite cute, he shot her a few more glances. However, this made Sandy extremely jealous. Changing tastes. "Get lost. We're here for Jared. If you don't want to die, leave now," Sandy roared at Maria. The moment Sandy spoke, a few more vans appeared behind the Porsche and dozens of men emerged. Holding knives in their hands, they walked over hostilely. Maria's cheeks turned pale as fear overwhelmed her. For a moment, She had no idea what to do. Maria, you should leave first, suggested Jared to Maria as he got out of the car. She glanced at Jared, wanting to say something. However, when she saw the dozens of men all armed with knives, she was so scared that she rushed into the car and left. Jared, you're quite good with girls. Huh. Immediately after being dumped by Josephine, you found yourself another rich girl. She doesn't seem young, but she's driving a BMW. It looks like her family background is quite good. Huh. Which family is she from? Leighton asked Jared with a mocking smile playing on his lips. Why? Do you want to try something new? Jared smiled. You really should. It's really quite inappropriate as the heir of the Scott family to keep taking someone else's leftovers. Leighton's expression contorted into a menacing one when he heard that. Actually, he had always been hung up over it. Although Sandy tried her best to explain that she had never done anything or slept with Jared when they were dating, Leighton was still bothered by it. If he did not genuinely like Sandy and was even considering marriage with her, he would have abandoned her a long time ago. Jared, why don't you f***ing look at yourself? Do you have any self-awareness? How can I possibly sleep with you? Stop thinking too highly of yourself. I feel disgusted whenever I see you. Sandy was so furious that she hurled insults at Jared. It was obvious that he was trying to sow discord in her relationship with Leighton. Jared, there's no need to sabotage our relationship by running your mouth like that. I trust that Sandy would have never slept with you. Besides, look at yourself. You probably can't even do what a man can, right? Otherwise, Sandy wouldn't have dumped you. If you were good in bed and could capture her heart, you wouldn't have fallen to such a miserable state. Leighton clenched his jaw. Although he claimed to be unbothered, he secretly was tormented by it. You don't know which one of us is good in bed. Haven't you discovered it recently? Jared smirked coldly. When he left prison, he had already crippled Leighton. Now, the latter could not even be considered a complete man. Leighton flushed right after Jared spoke. He had been recuperating recently. Logically speaking, since Jared had only broken his arm, it should not affect anything else. However, during his intimate moments with Sandy, he would not have any reactions at all, even after taking off their clothes. Initially, Leighton thought that his injury had affected it. However, his heart skipped a beat when he heard what Jared said. Lee, stop listening to Jared's nonsense. I know very well whether you're capable in bed or not. You're the best. Stop wasting any more time with him. Just kill him and toss him into the river, urged Sandy. Leighton nodded and threatened Jared. It'll be your death anniversary on this exact date next year. I'll let you know the consequences of offending me. With that, he waved his hands. Attack. Just slash him to death and throw him into the river. At his command, the dozens of men charged toward Jared with their knives raised. The Crimson Dragon Gang asked Jared with a cold smirk as he gazed at the attackers. Underestimate me. When Leighton saw that Jared was still in the mood to laugh, he could not help but become angrier. Jared, it doesn't matter if you found out because you're about to die soon. It's true that they're from the Crimson Dragon Gang, but they can kill ruthlessly without blinking. Do you think that you'd still stand a chance of surviving today? A menacing expression appeared on Leighton's face, while his gaze was filled with viciousness. I think that I'll probably still continue living well after today. Jared smiled. Glancing at the dozens of members from the Crimson Dragon Gang, he asked, Didn't Felix warn all of you against offending me? Jared's words caused the members of the Crimson Dragon Gang to freeze on the spot and scrutinize him. Who are you? How do you know Mr. Lawson's name? Asked a middle-aged man who was wearing a long-sleeved shirt. It was evident that he was the leader of this team from the Crimson Dragon Gang. You have no right to know who I am. Before you attack me, you better call Felix over, said Jared calmly. Stop pretending, Jared. Do you think that you can meet Felix whenever you want? Leighton stepped forward. Don't fear him. I know this jerk well. He's not anyone important. In fact, he's nothing but an ex-convict who has just been released from prison. Kill him now. I'll give 200,000 to whoever kills him first. I'll give another 100,000 to whoever attacks him. Leighton knew that people lust over money the most. As long as the temptation was strong enough, they would all lose their rationality and resort to anything just to get it. When the men heard that the person who could kill Jared first could get 200,000, they charged toward him frantically, all hoping to be the first. Although Leighton had paid the Crimson Dragon gang a significant amount of money, their share was actually quite measly when divided amongst themselves. Looking at the men, who were willingly sending themselves to death, Jared scoffed coldly. He raised his hand and grabbed a huge knife. Before anyone could see him attack, he shattered the thick knife in half. The man from the Crimson Dragon gang, who was at the front, stared at his broken knife in fear. The others were stunned too. They did not expect him to be able to grab a knife with his bare hands and break it into two. Furthermore, his hand was completely uninjured. How is this possible? When Leighton saw this scene, he widened his eyes in disbelief. Just when everyone was still dumbfounded, Jared raised his leg and sent that man from the Crimson Dragon gang flying away with a kick. The man flew backward for more than 10 meters before crashing onto the ground in front of Leighton. Blood spurted out of his mouth continuously. It was uncertain whether he could still survive. As Leighton watched the bloody scene, a grim expression crossed his face. Sandy was so scared that she quickly hid behind him. Don't just stand there. Attack him at once. Even if he can stop a knife with his bare hands, you've got the strength in numbers. You can slice him up very easily, bellowed Leighton loudly. The Crimson Dragon gang returned to their senses. Raising their knives again, they charged toward Jared. However, Jared dodged and swerved around everyone else quickly, moving so fast that his body merely looked like a flash. Since they were from the Crimson Dragon gang, there was no need for him to show any mercy. Within a minute, everyone had collapsed on the ground in front of him. Cries of agony echoed across the space. Everyone was covered in blood, and their limbs and legs had been broken, making them all crippled. Jared did not make any fatal attacks, sparing those members from the Crimson Dragon gang. When Leighton saw the pathetic scene in front of him, he trembled uncontrollably. Meanwhile, Sandy's cheeks turned pale from fear, and she did not even dare to meet Jared's gaze. Are you planning to take revenge on me just with these men? Are you underestimating me? Jared strolled toward Leighton slowly. Chance. Leighton was trembling with fear as he stared at Jared. Jared, stay back. Don't come any closer. You've incapacitated so many members of the Crimson Dragon gang. They'll definitely come for you. Despite being in such a dire situation himself, Leighton shamelessly threatened Jared. Do you think I'm scared of the Crimson Dragon gang? Jared then walked toward Leighton and smiled. I'm giving you another chance. Go ahead and call the Crimson Dragon gang for backup, but make sure you ask for fighters who are more capable this time around. Leighton looked at Jared with his doubtful eyes and gradually took out his phone. After seeing that Jared didn't attempt to stop him, Leighton made a phone call to Felix. Mr. Scott, I didn't expect it to be done so soon. Are you calling to make your final payment? Felix asked excitedly. Mr. Lawson, your men are all incapacitated. They were all so useless. Leighton was frustrated by the fact that 30 of them couldn't even handle Jared. Felix rose to his feet immediately and shouted in anger. What did you say? My men are incapacitated. Yes, indeed. They're all howling in pain as we speak. Half of them lost their arms, while the other half won't ever walk again for the rest of their lives. Have a listen if you don't believe me. Leighton then faced his phone toward the defeated men from the Crimson Dragon gang. Felix was livid when he heard his men crying in pain. FCK. Which idiot had the balls to cross the Crimson Dragon gang? Give me your location now. I'll head over straight away. Leighton hung up the phone after giving his location to Felix. He then smiled smugly at Jared and said, You're doomed. You've angered the Crimson Dragon gang, and Mr. Lawson will be here soon. Stay here if you dare. I'll see if you can still act tough later. Since I said I'd give you another chance, I'll definitely keep my words. I'll wait for him. Jared grinned. With no intention to flee, Jared then found a spot and sat down comfortably. When Leighton saw how relaxed Jared was, his eyes glittered. Once Mr. Lawson gets here, you're dead. A few cars appeared after around 10 minutes. It was Felix along with his subordinates. Ha ha ha. Mr. Lawson is here. You're dead, Jared. Leighton let out a hearty laugh as soon as he saw Felix's arrival. Then, he rushed to greet him. After getting out of the car, Felix was furious when he saw his subordinates all over the ground, as they howled in pain. Who dared to lay their hands on my subordinates? I'm going to kill him now. Felix was so loud that he could be heard from afar. His voice was full of murderous intent. Even Leighton was shell-shocked. That would be me. Jared stood up and walked toward Felix. After having a closer look at who he was dealing with, Felix froze on the spot. He was so terrified that all his anger turned into silence. Mr. Lawson, this is the fellow that incapacitated your subordinates. You ought to finish him now. Leighton was almost jumping in excitement when he told Felix who was the culprit. To his surprise, Felix walked hastily toward Jared and said respectfully, "It's you, Mr. Chance. I'm so sorry. I didn't know it was you." When Leighton saw how apologetic and respectful Felix was toward Jared, he was so stupefied that his eyes almost popped out. "Mr. Lawson, what are you doing? Why are you apologizing to him? He's just an ex-convict. You don't have to be afraid of him." Leighton was puzzled. "Shut up." Felix abruptly turned toward Leighton and gave him a tight slap across his face. "Pointers." Then Felix turned back toward Jared and said, "Mr. Chance, if I knew it was you who Leighton was having a problem with, I'd have never accepted his money. Please be magnanimous and spare me some mercy, Mr. Chance." Before Jared could open his mouth, Leighton went mad and roared, "What the hell is happening? You guys are the Crimson Dragon Gang. Why in the world would you be afraid of a random ex-convict? Yet, you dare to proclaim yourselves as the fiercest gang in Horrington." Leighton was perplexed by what was happening before his eyes. What is about Jared that's so scary? So what if he can fight well? The Crimson Dragon Gang has hundreds of fighters. Why would it matter how good of a fighter Jared is? It's not like he can defeat hundreds of people at once. What are you babbling about? The Crimson Dragon Gang doesn't need to take pointers from you. If you don't shut up now, I'll kill you. Felix turned and gave Leighton a long, cold stare. The latter immediately went silent when he saw Felix's devilish eyes. Out of a sudden, a huge crowd dressed in black was seen rushing toward them. There were hundreds of them, and they were all armed. The crowd was so big that Leighton and the others could feel the ground shaking below them. Felix was flabbergasted when he saw the crowd. Leighton was swamped by puzzlement once again. No one had an idea who were those people. But it didn't take long for them to figure out, because the crowd was getting ever closer. They soon saw Tommy leading the charge. Instantly, they knew that the crowd behind him was from the Templar Regiment. Felix's expression grew even more distorted when he saw Tommy. Leighton, on the other hand, was just speechless as he watched Tommy and the others run past him. "Protect Mr. Chance. Don't let anyone leave," Tommy commanded angrily. "Yes." The members of the Templar Regiment responded all at once. Then, they formed a big circle and blocked off all the exits. "Are you all right, Mr. Chance?" Tommy anxiously asked when he made his way toward Jared. "What do you think?" "Of course I'm all right." Jared flashed a faint smile. Evidently, Leighton's day was just full of surprises that he couldn't comprehend. Tommy brought all these people here to protect Jared, and why is he being so respectful toward him? Just now, the Crimson Dragon Gang had practically just bowed before Jared. Now the Templar Regiment. These are the two fiercest gangs in Horrington. What is going on? "Felix, did your guys from the Crimson Dragon Gang ambush Mr. Chance? I'm going to kill all of you right now." Tommy was livid. Although he felt uneasy being spoken to in such a degrading manner, Felix knew it was not the right time to retaliate. Since their gang leader, Stephen, was still away, he had no choice but to swallow his pride. "This is just a misunderstanding. This is all Leighton's doing," Felix explained hastily. The moment Tommy heard what Felix said, he turned his furious gaze toward Leighton. Leighton almost peed his pants when he saw Tommy looking at him. Tommy bolted toward Leighton and slapped him across his face. "If you touch Mr. Chance again, not only will I kill you, but I'll bury your whole Scott family as well." Tommy's words were bold and true. The Templar Regiment definitely had the ability to destroy the Scott family entirely. "Tommy Lewis, the Scott family had helped you before. How dare you bring these people here to have a go at me? How dare you hit me?" Leighton went berserk. Yes, that's exactly the reason why you've only received a slap. Otherwise, you'd be dead already. Tommy glared at him coldly. Leighton was so scared that he didn't dare to look at Tommy anymore. At the same time, he was still wondering why these gangs were so afraid of Jared. Mr. Chance. Suddenly, a male voice was heard coming from nearby. Walter had brought Luca along with him as they dashed toward Jared. Upon seeing that Jared was unharmed, Walter let out a long sigh of relief. I heard that the Crimson Dragon Gang was coming at you, Mr. Chance. I rushed here as fast as I could. Luckily, you're all right, Mr. Chance. Paired. Shortly after Walter's arrival, William and Josephine arrived at the scene. Josephine was worried sick that Jared might have been hurt. She hurried toward him and checked his body for injuries. Upon seeing both the famous and the infamous individuals' arrivals, Felix felt utterly helpless. In his mind, he was blaming Leighton for putting him in that tough spot. Once more, Leighton was bewildered. Since Tommy and Felix belonged to the underworld, maybe they paid Jared respect because he's a renowned fighter. But why Walter as well? He was a government official. Hence, he's the total opposite of what Tommy and Felix are. Even though he's retired, he's still a highly regarded individual in Horrington. Otherwise, all the rich and famous wouldn't have attended every event he has held. So why is he here for Jared? What is going on here? Wasn't Jared dumped by Josephine? He has even moved out of Dragon Bay and became a salesperson. Why is Josephine so worried about him still? Sandy curiously blurted while hiding behind Leighton, stunned. Upon hearing that, anger overwhelmed Josephine as she walked toward Sandy and gave the latter a tight slap across her face. Considering the events happening around them, neither Sandy nor Leighton dared to retaliate against Josephine. UBTCH. Luckily you've left Jared. Otherwise, you'd only bring shame onto him. It seems like God is fair after all by pairing you two scums together. Josephine glared at Sandy with disdain. Although both Leighton and Sandy felt extremely humiliated, they both kept mum. Mr. Chance, what should we do about these two? Tommy asked while pointing at Leighton and Sandy. Both their legs wobbled in fear when they heard Tommy's question. They knew that Jared could have them killed just by giving an order. Mr. Chance, I beg for your mercy. Please spare my son. Before Jared could give Tommy an answer, Yoel rushed over and dropped to his knees to beg. The Scott family was indeed powerful, but faced with all the important figures in Horrington at once, Yoel had no choice but to submit. After all, if any of them wished to run the Scott family down, they could. Besides Leighton's life, the Scott family's empire could be wiped out entirely. Dad, what are you doing? Leighton was dumbfounded when he saw his father kneeling before Jared, especially with everyone watching. Ultimately, the Scott family was still a prominent family in Horrington. Hence, it was a shocking scene to have the patriarch, Yoel, kneeling before a young man such as Jared. You be-starred. Come and beg for mercy as well. Yoel pulled Leighton aggressively before slapping him across his face. Behind them, Sandy was standing still with her jaws opened. She couldn't believe what she was witnessing. Hey, SLT. This is your fault. Look what you've brought upon my son. Kneel down, now. Yoel got up abruptly before bringing Sandy to her knees by kicking her violently. Jared grinned as he watched the three of them beg for mercy. It's time to go. Jared stood up and left. Tommy and Walter, along with all the people they brought, followed behind. Embarrassed, Felix did the same. He left with all of his incapacitated subordinates. Still, with both their knees glued to the ground, Leighton, Yoel, and Sandy remained. Never too late. Why? Why are they so afraid of Jared? Leighton shouted in rage. He's just an ex-convict. Why are they all fawning over him? Slap. Leighton shut his mouth instantly upon receiving another slap from Yoel. Listen to me. From today onward, steer clear of Jared. Pay him the respect he deserves. You're not in the position to go against him now, no matter how much you hate him. Just swallow your pride in the meantime. Besides, it's never too late to seek revenge. However, now is just not the right time. You'll only be inviting trouble if you agitate him. Again, Yoel advised Leighton assertively while standing up. A cold glint flashed across Leighton's eyes as he nodded. Although I don't have the capability now, I'll come back to you in the future. Indeed, the Scott family was no match for any one of the parties that came for Jared. If Leighton were to strike back, those parties might even link up and destroy the Scott family for good. Yoel let out a long sigh of relief after seeing Leighton acknowledging the advice given. He then tapped on Leighton's shoulder and said, "Let's go. I hope you can learn from this." Lee. Sandy grabbed onto Leighton's legs when she saw him leaving her behind. Leighton was all that she had left. After all, she had betrayed Jared for him. She'd have no one to rely upon besides Leighton. Leighton turned and looked at Sandy. He couldn't bear to leave her. Get lost. Yoel kicked Sandy to the side and scolded. "UBTCH. I knew you were a jinx the moment I laid eyes on you." Yoel had never been fond of Sandy because they were too far apart in terms of social status. He had no choice but to give his blessings when Leighton was adamant about marrying her. But the incident that just happened gave Yoel a solid reason to object to their relationship. Yoel and Leighton left Sandy sobbing convulsively. Meanwhile, Josephine was giving Jared a ride back home. Jared then asked Josephine curiously, "How did you all know that the Crimson Dragon Gang was coming at me?" "I found out about it when I received a call from Mr. and Mrs. Chance. Then, I got my dad to inform Tommy and Mr. Grange," Josephine explained. "My parents called." Jared was shocked for a moment, but it didn't take long for him to realize that it was Maria who told his parents about the trouble he was facing. Mom and Dad must have contacted Josephine right away because they knew she would have contacts for such situations. Josephine left after sending Jared home. She didn't accompany him further, due to the misunderstandings between her and his parents. After Jared had gotten out of the car, he walked toward his house, but suddenly, he spotted Hilda lurking behind a towering tree. She was looking right back at him. Hilda intended to run away the moment she realized Jared had spotted her. Unfortunately, she was stopped in her tracks by Jared. "Hilda, what are you doing here so late at night?" Jared asked with a puzzled tone. "I was only taking a stroll after dinner. You ought to get back home now. Your parents are worried sick." Hilda then left in a rush. "What's going on with her?" Jared shook his head and headed home. In the house, Hannah was sobbing while Gary was smoking stressfully. Franklin, Maria, and Chloe were also present. Chloe was constantly comforting Hannah. "Hannah, don't worry. Jared is going to be fine. He might even be home soon." Despite her own words, Chloe had a worried expression on her as well. "Unity. Mom, Dad, I'm home," Jared yelled out right after Chloe finished her sentence. Everyone stood up and rushed over to the entrance to welcome Jared. Jared was startled when he saw so many people at his home. "Jared, are you okay?" Hannah kept running her hands through Jared to find out if he was hurt. "Mom, I'm fine. I'm just hungry. I haven't had my dinner." Jared smiled. "I'm glad you're fine. I'll go prepare dinner for you," Hannah exclaimed with a bright smile on her face. "I'll accompany you, Hannah." Chloe helped Hannah to the kitchen. "Hi, Mr. Saunders," Jared greeted when he saw Franklin. "Are you really all right?" Franklin was sizing Jared up. "I realized something was wrong when Maria came back with the news. I knew the Porsche belonged to Leighton, and since you guys aren't on good terms, surely he was going to find trouble with you. But too bad, all my contacts didn't dare to go up against the Scott family. I had no choice but to sit and wait." "I'm fine, Mr. Saunders. Thanks for your concern." A grateful smile flashed across Jared's face when he saw how much Franklin cared about him. "That's good. It's getting late now. We shall make a move." Franklin and Maria left shortly after. Although Maria didn't say a word throughout, Jared saw a hint of relief in her eyes, now that he got back unharmed. He went to bed after dinner, and Chloe headed home after hanging out for a bit. The next day, Jared went to Dragon Bay for his training. He didn't improve much despite being there the whole day. Well, it's still better than nothing. On Monday morning, Jared arrived at the sales department. However, he sensed an unusual vibe in the air. Mr. Jennings would usually organize a corporate meeting every Monday. "What's going on? Why haven't we heard from him?" "Exactly. I've been here for 3 years now. This is the first time this has happened. What's going on? Has Mr. Jennings fallen sick?" Everyone in the sales department was whispering among themselves. That's enough. Stop speculating. Once Zane gets here, I'm sure he'll tell us what's going on, Maria said to the others. Not long after that, Zane arrived with a document in his hands. Mr. Carlson, what happened to Mr. Jennings? Yeah, I don't think I've seen him coming to work today. Have you seen him? I heard he left early last Friday. Is that true? Everyone directed their questions toward Zane. Mr. Jennings was fired and has left the company, Zane said in despair. He was devastated because he had already invested so much time and effort to butter Xavier up. He even had eyes on being promoted to the managerial post in the procurement department. But since Xavier had gone, so did his hopes and dreams. What? Why? Then who will be our general manager? This is too sudden. There wasn't any sign nor warning. Exactly. Now that Mr. Jennings is gone, we'd have to cope with someone new. Surely our next general manager is going to be harsh on us. We're doomed. Everyone started discussing among themselves. Shut your mouths, Zane roared. He was already in a bad mood upon receiving the news. The endless discussions had only irritated him even more. Everyone went silent and stared at Zane. Regardless of who is going to be our new general manager, every one of us in the sales department should stick together. Unity is strength. Zane was worried that the newly appointed general manager was going to go hard on him. Hence, he took the opportunity to unite his staff and gain support from them. Yes, we'll follow Mr. Carlson's instructions. I'll go wherever you point toward, Mr. Carlson. Don't worry, Mr. Carlson. You have our support. Everyone in the sales department renounced their allegiance to Zane.